everyone, welcome back to Onyx YouTube. We're here today with Dakota Graff. Very exciting. Welcome, Dakota.
Hi.
And today we are specifically talking about coffee varieties. That is a word you will see pretty commonly on coffee packaging, and we want to talk a little bit about what that is. So, just to start us off, Dakota, what are coffee varieties?
No big deal. Coffee varieties are basically, you have like the whole thing of specialty coffee, which is most of the time Arabica coffee. Within that, there are like little subsets of different genetic characteristics, which we categorize as coffee varieties. And that helps us delineate flavor, how it's grown, somewhat how it'll roast as well. There's a lot of stuff that goes into coffee varieties. We'll cover some of it today. This will be a pretty broad
We could
video.
go really deep into this if you wanted to.
Yeah, but that's sort of the whole idea of coffee varieties, is that it's a genetic characteristic of the plant and of the seed, which makes it different.
Yeah, I always like to think about it kind of as like apples, because you have like apples in general, but then you
Yeah.
have like Gala, you have like
Totally.
Red Delicious, and you have like all these different ones. That's kind of what it is with coffee as well.
Yeah.
And we have a bunch in front of us right now. Now, very specifically, we have one that is not a variety. We have a species
correct.
here, but they look very, very different. Just visually, you can tell like this coffee bean is significantly smaller than this one over here. So,
Yeah.
what do we have in front of us right now?
Yeah, so, well, let's talk about the one that's not Arabica, because that's kind of fun. This is a species. This is Coffea Eugenoides, so it's super, super small. So coffee oftentimes is screen sized at the dry mill, which means it is made homogeneous of one size. Eugenoides is made homogeneous of one size, but it's also grown, which you saw maybe 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
It's grown and it's super, super small.
It's tiny.
The
It's
cherries
pretty
are small, the seeds are
The
small.
leaves are small.
Yeah, everything is just small.
Yeah.
So that's Coffea Eugenoides. Something that is kind of similar in size to this that's an Arabica variety would be Mocha,
Sure.
which
Yeah.
we have had fairly recently. Yeah.
Delicious.
Yeah. Second one.
The rest of these are Arabica, by the way.
Yeah. The second one is actually a blend of a couple different varieties, which is, this is Catuai and some Caturra. It's actually a natural process coffee from Costa Rica. Catuai, Caturra, they're pretty similar in makeup and in size. They process, they roast, they are usually just kind of blended all together. The flavor of those tends to be a little bit more sugar browning, has a little bit more base notes. The tactile is a little bit more rounder. This is a pretty oversimplification of variety. but-
Generalization.
Yeah.
Sure.
And this one we've got here, which is actually a Geisha variety. So
Yeah.
Geisha variety is one of the most prominently known. It's easiest to pick out for me, at least, because it's long,
They're
it's kind
very
of
distinct.
slender,
Yep.
very distinct. And especially on the cupping table, you can usually pick them out based on their like high floral notes. They're very black tea forward. You get some bergamot, some citric acid, depending on where it's grown and how it's processed.
Sure.
But the Geisha variety, for me, like I said, very easy to pick out. And last but not
The
least
big boys.
is our Pacamara variety. Pacamara variety is actually a hybrid variety. It's crossed between Pacas and Maragogipe. Maragogipe is like a huge variety. It's the largest Arabica coffee seed that I've seen. And the Pacamara is just slightly smaller than that due to its cross with Pacas.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. As far as you were talking a little bit earlier about kind of the differences in the varieties, as far as unique characteristics of them, like you gave a little bit on this one, but how do you treat them differently, both in kind of like roast and when you're profiling them? Like, do you have like an expectation of what they'll taste up like just based on the variety you see on the whatever paper you have?
Yeah, sort of. I do in the terms of, I kind of loosely know how a coffee variety will respond to heat application, especially like, I'm not gonna roast our Caturra like I would roast a Pacamara.
Yeah.
And that's mostly due to the Pacamara's size. It's more brittle as well.
Sure.
But the flavor precursors are kind of always there in a very general sense, which would be Pacamaras tend to be, they can tend to be a little bit more like oniony, some herbals, but when it's processed and roasted really well, it's also like super floral and really, really delicate. And so there's a lot of flavor precursors. Obviously, I kind of covered on Geisha.
Sure.
Eugenoides is just a whole other thing.
Whole beast of its own.
Yeah.
Approximately, how many varieties of coffee are there right now?
There are countless numbers of varieties. I think I knew at one point, but I think it's probably upwards of,
And there are
100
more
varieties.
coming. Like there's constantly kind of crossbreeding and perfecting of different varieties to make new ones as well.
Yeah, even when I visited farms fairly recently, I was in Colombia, and they would say like, hey, we picked this variety, we selected it out because we noticed that different characteristics in the plants and in the cup, and so they've selected. I even fairly recently visited a farm that had developed their own variety over the course of like a 7-year project.
It's really, really cool.
So there's always kind of new varieties. World Coffee Research is pretty reliable as far as what has been cataloged in the past, and so I oftentimes will reference that when I see like either a new variety or people have questions about varieties. I'll send them there.
Very cool. And then we also tend to see, at least kind of in the industry, trends in varieties, and this often comes across in competitions as well. Like a little less so maybe now, but previously, like Geisha varieties were like that was what was used in competition. Are there any other trends we see in varieties, either on the growing side or in competition?
I think that Geisha still prominently dominates the competition scene, especially when you see like auctions or competitions like the Cup of Excellence. Oftentimes I see new producers growing geishas, submitting them. They do very well, so I totally understand. They also fetch a high price. So that trend is sort of always staying there. A couple of varieties that I've seen more and more often is actually the Java variety, which is fairly similar to Geisha.
Honestly, this year in the USBC, there were a couple competitors with Javas, which is really cool to see.
Personally, I love Java varieties. When I cup them, they cup like a very prominent watermelon note or like a honeydew. So I really enjoy them. So that's a trend I've seen. Obviously, we've seen the total kind of resurgence of the Cafe Eugenoides thing go on in competition scene. However, I haven't really seen it being cultivated.
On a consumer side, it's very difficult.
And especially even on a coffee production side, I haven't seen it cultivated outside of maybe 1 or 2 plants on a couple farms.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, thank you, Dakota.
Sure.
This was very helpful.
Yeah.
Hope you all have gleaned some new information about varieties. We will also have some resources down in the description below if you'd like to learn even more. And in the meantime, we will have plenty more on this channel, so please subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah.
Hey,
Thanks.
everyone.
Bye.
Cool.
Take strings.
Yeah, I know. The urge was there.